Last week I covered the 4 money classrooms that make up our financial background and how those experiences still shape us as adults today based on author and financial personality Rachel Cruz's latest book, Know Yourself, Know Your Money. For those who didn't catch that video, according to Cruz, there are 4 major money classrooms: anxious, unstable, unaware, and secure. The anxious classroom is characterized by being stressful, but with little, if any, financial communication at home. The unstable classroom is also stressful, but does regularly have, usually heated, conversations surrounding money in the home. The unaware classroom is characterized by its lack of stress surrounding money, and financial communication is usually infrequent. Finally, the secure classroom is characterized by being both calm and with having regular money conversations. Which classroom or classrooms you primarily fall into depend as much on how you perceived and remembered the financial situation of the household growing up as it does on what was actually the case. And some of us will have spent time in more than one of these classrooms. Each classroom presents its own challenges and shapes how we see and deal with money as an adult, as I went over in more detail in last week's video. But they also impact our fears surrounding money, which is what we'll be covering today. Let's talk about the 6 money fears and how to overcome them. But before we get going, be sure to like this video if you haven't already, as it really does help out the channel a lot, and subscribe with notifications on for more money-related videos like this one every single week. And if you want to further support this channel, you can check out some of the links I've left in the description below, which includes a 30-day free trial of Audible and 2 free audiobooks of your choice, as well as a list of some books on money I'd recommend checking out with your free trial. According to Cruz, there are 6 main money fears that people deal with. They are the fear of financial survivability, the fear of unrealized dreams and goals, the fear of financial ignorance or incapability, the fear of external forces, the fear of past mistakes, and the fear of repeating the past. These fears can be experienced by people of all financial backgrounds, but how we interpret or respond to them may differ. Let's go over each fear individually and discuss how we can manage them in a more healthy way. Financial survivability is the fear of the what-if scenario. What if the AC breaks? What if I get laid off? What if I get sick or injured and have to stay in the hospital? These are scary questions, but they are questions that many of us will have to ask ourselves from time to time. And we can easily find ourselves going to a very dark place when these questions come up, especially if we have a lot of anxieties around money or come from a background where we've experienced some significant difficult times because of some of those what-if scenarios. And while there isn't really a way to completely eradicate ourselves of this fear, or any of these fears for that matter, thankfully there are some things within our control that we can do to manage it in a more healthy way. The first tip that Cruz gives in her book is to get a fully funded emergency fund set up. The general rule of thumb is to save 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, but some people, myself included, tend to save up a little bit more than that, either because it helps them sleep better at night, or because our incomes or expenses are variable, so we want to have a little bit extra cushion should something happen to one or the other. The second tip is to put together a budget that we can get behind. For many of us, there are some areas where we could be a little bit more financially efficient if we had a fuller picture of where our money is actually going, and that's what budgets oftentimes help us do. For some, this can make quite a difference as well. Best-selling author Vicki Robbins says that in her experience, most people that she's seen get their budgets under control and pursue a more frugal lifestyle see their expenses fall by about 20 to 25%. A third thing that we can do is to lower our burn rate by limiting or eliminating as many ongoing, unavoidable expenses as possible. This can take many forms, such as paying off debts to buying things outright instead of paying a monthly subscription for them. A fourth thing that we can do is to get proper protection in the form of good insurance. We don't need to buy insurance for every little thing, but for things that could end up costing us hundreds or even thousands of dollars if something went wrong, it can be a good idea. The second fear, that of unrealized dreams and goals, is one that I'm sure we can all relate with. We've all found ourselves in a situation at one point or another where we just don't seem to have enough time or money or both to do something we've always dreamed of doing. Perhaps you wanted to take a road trip around the country, or abroad like your parents used to. Perhaps you had an eye on a dream house or car that just seems to always be a little bit out of reach. Maybe you just wanted to get your son or daughter into a good school, and it can be really depressing to feel like you have to let those dreams go, or at least downsize them. But sometimes it is the best option. Other times, though, it's an opportunity to really get creative. What if you carpooled with someone to make your cross-country trip more affordable? Or maybe house sat for part of the trip to save on accommodation costs, which are usually some of the most expensive parts of travel. Perhaps you could save up vacation time and take the trip in an off-season when prices for all sorts of things travel-related are lower. And if all else fails, perhaps there's still a way that you can get a taste of your dream without having to shell out the cash for the whole experience as you had originally envisioned, by just reframing the situation. Reading up on blogs, watching videos, and asking people who've already done what you're looking at doing can be a great way to get ideas for this. The fear of financial ignorance, or not being very good with money, is another common one. It often sounds something like this. Everyone who's winning with money is smart. They understand complicated math, and they usually go to school for finance. Most of them are investment professionals, so, of course they're going to do well with money. But that's not me. I don't know how money works. I didn't go to school for it, and I'm terrible at math. So it's just not going to happen for me. Now, this fear can be particularly devastating long term, because if we don't recognize it for what it is, and manage it in a healthy way, it effectively shuts us off from our ability to learn more about money and use that knowledge to improve our situation over time. With that being said, I do want to acknowledge a few things. First, yes, some people do go to school for finance. I was one of them. But here's the thing you may not realize if you never went to school for finance. Most of the financial classes you take in school are not really focused on mastering your own personal finances. They're there to help you get a job in the finance industry. Yeah, I know, shocking, right? You're learning more about accounting and corporate finance than you are about budgeting and human psychology. So while you do learn some stuff that is beneficial on a personal financial level, it's probably not as much as most people would think for someone that spent multiple years going to school for finance. Second, we all have financial blind spots and things that we don't know when it comes to finances. And that's okay, as long as we're working towards getting more knowledge where it counts over time. Which, in the realm of personal finance, is usually something along the lines of self-awareness and understanding. And remember, our own financial choices play as much of a role in achieving personal financial success, if not an even bigger role, than how many financial factoids or abbreviations we know. Consistency is key. Third, you don't really need a whole lot of complicated math to win with money. If you can handle a calculator well enough to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you've basically got all the mathematical abilities you likely need. And fourth, if you need help learning these things, there are entire industries built specifically for that. There are the financial professionals that are there to help you understand the risks and rewards of investing. There are budgeting apps and websites built around helping you get control over your spending. And then there are content creators out there helping people to learn about a wide variety of financial and psychological concepts. Most of these things can be utilized for free, and best of all, at your own pace. So if the fear of not being good enough to win with money is something that haunts you, take advantage of these resources. Be like the tortoise from that classic Tortoise and the Hare fable. Take it slow and steady, one step at a time, and soon enough, you'll learn what you need to in order to achieve financial success. The fear of external forces come in a couple of flavors. Perhaps the most common ones being that the world is stacked against you in one way or another, or that your success is dependent upon something or someone that you can't control. And there is some truth to it in the sense that external forces can make things easier or harder than they otherwise would have been. For instance, if you were never taught anything about money growing up, then you'll have more work ahead of you than someone who is educated on the topic, all else being equal. The same is true if Congress passes some law that helps or hinders your progress in some way, shape, or form. But in the vast majority of cases, these external forces aren't the end-all, be-all conversation. I see them kind of like game sliders. In video games, you're often able to tweak the difficulty by altering a handful of settings. So say if you're playing a strategy game, you might be able to change some settings to make your computer opponents more or less aggressive, which thus alters the effective difficulty of the game. But changing those sliders doesn't prevent you from changing up your own strategy in a way that allows you to still win the game. And the same is true for your financial life. When it comes to finances, Cruz mentions 4 things that you can exact some measure of control over that'll help you to succeed regardless of what external forces are doing. The first is your beliefs surrounding money. If you don't believe that you can succeed with money, that's going to influence your behavior in a way that makes it really difficult to succeed with money. Everyone's going to be a little different in this regard, but some of the things that helped me shift my beliefs about money were just learning more about it, since it opened my mind to possibilities that I hadn't considered before, and reading stories about other regular people who succeeded financially. The second is your work ethic. Achieving and maintaining financial success is usually going to require some hard work. If it were easy, everyone would do it. So being willing to put in that work will help you to overcome many of the challenges you face. The third is your money itself. Doing this does require some level of discipline and good financial habits, which we all have to develop over time. It all comes back to things like understanding yourself and what you actually want out of your money in life, and then budgeting your money to set yourself up for that life, investing wisely so that you can build up enough funds to achieve your longer-term goals, and so on and so forth. And fourth is your social group. It's often been said that you are who you hang out with. And while that's not true in the literal sense, humans are social creatures. We do tend to be influenced, for better or worse, by the ideas and habits and behaviors of those we surround ourselves with. So getting to know others who have healthy financial habits can go a long way towards getting you to where you want to go financially. The fear of past mistakes is the fear that you'll never be able to get ahead with money because of something you experienced in the past. This fear can be a particularly sinister one because it's so easy to simply avoid the discomfort of thinking about and fixing the mistakes we've made in the past. But if we don't think about past mistakes and as a result never do anything to fix them, the problems tend to just get worse over time. Think about things like failed businesses or massive piles of credit card debt. Actually, it can be even worse than that, because if we never acknowledge our past mistakes, we're also never going to learn from them. So not only will the mistake never be fixed, and as a result may grow bigger over time, there's also a good chance that we'll end up making the same mistake again and again and again. The thing we need to keep in mind when it comes to past mistakes is that, no matter how big they are, they don't define us unless we let them. Remember, there is a monumental difference between having failed at something and being a failure. Yes, a mistake means that, at least on that particular attempt, you failed to do what you wanted to do. There's nothing wrong with that. It happens to everyone, often multiple times a day. But that doesn't make you a failure. You can choose to get back up, adapt your approach based on the feedback life just gave you, and then try again. Finally, the fear of repeating the past, often summed up as, I don't want to end up like my parents, is the sixth and final fear that Cruz goes over in the book. Despite often being associated with one's parents, it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with them whatsoever. It can be a reaction to mistakes you've made or hardship that you've experienced in the past. For example, when my dad was younger, he had to live in his car for a while, and that experience changed how he handled his finances for the rest of his life. He'd do anything he could to ensure that the house and utilities were paid for so that he, and us kids by extension, would never have to experience that ever again. However, as you can imagine, this fear can be taken to an extreme. Someone buying a modest house that they can afford on their salary with some wiggle room to spare, in an effort to avoid becoming homeless like they once were after an over-leveraged home purchase went sideways, is probably on the right track. But someone who buys the cheapest place they can find with no regard for the quality of the neighborhood or the appreciation potential of the property, while doing nothing to maintain or improve the home while they live in it, so as not to exhaust the ever-growing pile of money that they have set aside in response to the same fear, is probably taking it a little bit to the extreme. A great way to manage this fear in a more healthy way is to find some financial role models that have gone through similar situations as the one that you're trying to avoid and have come out of it well. Then ask them questions so that you can learn how to do the same as well as what mistakes you'll want to avoid. With that being said, that doesn't mean that overcoming these fears is easy. There are a few challenges that we'll all likely face at some point or another. So let's discuss what they are so that we know what to expect going in and some things to keep in mind along the way. The first challenge is pushing through discomfort. Regardless of whether we're going back and trying to find a way to fix our past mistakes, or accepting our own responsibility in the success or failure of our financial situation, we're likely going to face some level of discomfort. Some things to keep in mind when facing it is that it's all part of the growing process, so don't be discouraged by it, and don't be afraid to reach out for help when you need it. We all do sometimes. And remember that just as with any other change you make, it can be difficult and exhausting at first, but it usually gets easier with time. Plus, successfully pushing through it can be empowering and give you a boost to self-confidence that'll help you tackle the next change that you want to make. A second challenge is that of dealing with naysayers. From time to time, there are going to be some people who don't support you or even think that you're crazy for trying to improve your financial standing. Maybe they think it's not worth it. Maybe they believe that it's not possible. Maybe they're dealing with their own issues financially and are displacing those feelings onto you. Whatever the case may be, it's a bit of resistance that you'll likely encounter at some point. So it's important to keep things in perspective. You're making these changes for a good reason, and then continue to reach out to your financial role models. Remember, we're social creatures and tend to be influenced to some degree by the beliefs and habits of those that we associate ourselves with regularly. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need to cut ties with those that aren't supporting us wholeheartedly, but we do want to make a conscious effort to keep in contact with those who are helping and encouraging us to achieve our goals. A third challenge is being on different pages with others. I've often heard people say that being single is like playing the game of finance on easy mode, because the only person you have making decisions is yourself. And while I don't really subscribe to that viewpoint, there are definitely financial challenges that couples face that singles don't. Simply put, not everyone sees things the same way as you do, and that can lead to miscommunications, stress, arguments, or sometimes even worse. As we've explored today and last week, so much of our financial success depends on our being able to understand ourselves and why we do what we do, financially and otherwise. And then, of course, being able to get ourselves to do the things we know we should on a consistent basis. But when we have a significant other, we also need to make an effort to understand them in the same way. Going through this process with your significant other can not only lead to understanding where they're coming from and being able to work with them better, but can also breed empathy and make it easier to forgive them for any mistakes they may have made. And vice versa, because of course you're going to make mistakes too. So if we want to build and maintain a strong, healthy, and long-lasting financial relationship with someone, we need to be able to handle those mistakes with compassion and grace. But that'll do it for me today. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button if you haven't already, subscribe, and hit that bell next to my name so you'll be notified of all my future uploads. I generally upload every single Monday, and if you have a friend that would be interested in this kind of content, be sure to share it with them. Let's really get this information out there and start our own financial revolution.